You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. Man, we are here once again, and today we have another amazing show lineup for y'all. We're going to talk to our special guest today, Miss Kelly Moser, and she is not just an experienced business strategist, she is also a resilience and leadership speaker, and she also has an amazing show, Top 2% Podcast. Man, first and foremost, I want to talk about today's topic. It's going to be how to develop a truly resilient mindset as an entrepreneur. But we first going to learn a little bit more about Kelly. I just want to say welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really grateful to be here. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Man, I'm doing awesome, man. It's the weekend, so you know what that means. It's time to have some fun.
I know. Time to let the hair down.
Right? Well, in my case, I'll just trim it and keep it short. So a little bit about you before we get into today's topic. Tell a little bit about your experience being a business strategist and also being a coach.
Yeah, absolutely. So I came out of school, went right into the business strategy world, not working for myself, but working for top, Fortune 500 companies, working for mid-sized startups, and fell in love with strategy, fell in love with setting a goal and helping a team arrive at that goal. So by the time I left my startup career as a strategist, I was leading a big team. I had helped grow the business, I think like 5x, helped grow the business that much in a short amount of time. And I realized, I have the skills to do this on my own and bring my own spin to it, make it a little bit more holistic, make it a little bit more based in values and spirituality and a really grounded sense of who you are, and let that be the catalyst that grows your business. So I ventured out on my own, and I've been doing this for about 4 years now. And I love it. It's been a real journey. It's, entrepreneurship is not easy, and everyone says that, but until you're actually in the shoes yourself, you don't really even know what that means. I don't think I did not expect the ups and downs of this roller coaster ride. So a big part of what I now coach people on, I support other entrepreneurs, highly in demand creative people who are really doing their own thing and blazing their own trail. Those are the kinds of people I really like to coach. And the same themes come up over and over and over again. And the biggest one, I think, is the importance of building a mindset that's really resilient, because no matter what industry you're in, you're going to get knocked down. And it's going to hurt unless you have the right kind of mindset really locked in. So that's kind of the crux of what I coach people on now. And it's really fun. I'm very grateful to be able to do the work I do.
And for you to be able to build a successful brand where you are solving problems, you're helping people break through their struggles that they're facing with. And that's part of the reason why they're using their expertise and your value of being able to help them navigating that entrepreneurship and business world. What's some of the core values that you implement when you're helping with your clients, as far as like the basics, the fundamentals to get the ball rolling?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think, everyone has different goals. Some people are really in the headspace of, I want to grow as fast as possible. Other people are more in the headspace of, I've grown and I'm exhausted and I don't know what to do next because I'm totally burnt out and I'm falling out of love with this thing that I used to be so passionate about. So I think it really depends on where the person is coming in from, what their entry point into the work is. But I'd say a couple things that across the board you got to have are a real sense of what your values are as a person, not just as an entrepreneur, just not just as a brand, not just as a business, but at the end of the day, when your head hits the pillow, are you happy with the way you carried yourself throughout the day? Are you happy with the way you treated people? Are you happy with the way you showed up? Were you in integrity? And I think that's a step that a lot of people miss in this work, especially when they're building a business. It's all about the KPIs. It's all about, the 20, 100K months. We skip that foundational part. And for me, every single person I work with has to be connected with what those values are. Because if you're not, you're basically just like an untethered balloon flying through space. You might be successful, but eventually that lack of fulfillment and sense of purpose will catch up with you if you're not rooted in your values. So we get to that first. We figure out, why are you doing this? And how do you want to show up in the world? What is out of alignment for you? What would it look like for you to be out of integrity? We want to make sure we understand what that looks like, because a lot of times people are operating out of alignment and out of integrity without even realizing it. That's not their fault. It's just they looked around, they saw what everyone else was doing, they tried to mimic it, copy it. I see a lot of people who are unhappy because they've built something that wasn't actually in alignment with their values, wasn't really in integrity for them, with their skills, with their gifts. So that's where we start first. And after that, the next thing we got to talk about is resilience, because as you're making changes, as you're growing, you are going to get the wind knocked out of you at some point. And if you don't have that resilient mindset in place, you're going to make that experience extremely personal. You're going to take that very personally. It's going to mean something about your self-worth. And that's the last thing we want. That is like raising the glass of poison to your lips as an entrepreneur. So those are the two things that I would really say are the most fundamental when I start working with someone. We've got to start there.
And that's a good segue to when it comes to someone leading, because that's a crucial point for anyone in any kind of who has any kind of influence. Mm-hmm. What was some of the characteristics of a good leader that is effective in where they are?
That's a great question. Resilience, for sure. Something that I've had to grow into a lot as a leader myself is I have people pleasing tendencies. A lot of people do, especially the women I work with, a lot of people pleasers. And for a long time, for a lot of us, achievement is very closely connected with people pleasing. There was a parent we wanted to please through achievement. There were teachers we wanted to please through achievement. It's become this thing that gets us a lot of praise. And so we feel very comfortable operating in that space of hyper independence, overachieving, giving too much without making sure our boundaries are locked in. So that's something that a lot of people need to be coached out of, is this really deep interconnection between achievement and worth. So someone who's able to kind of dismantle that within themselves makes a great leader, because you're not going to be liked all the time. If people pleasing is your top priority, if you're leading a team or you're leading a brand, you're just not always going to get that. And if your self-worth is too closely tied to your ability to please others, that's also a red flag for a leader. We want to make sure that you have a really healthy sense of what you need to do, and an understanding that might not always make you the most liked. But if you can stay in that integrity, if you can come back to your values, you're good. Even if people don't like you, that's okay. What we want to avoid is operating from a place where you're out of alignment and people don't like you, because then it means you're probably doing something that's just not in alignment with your values. So being able to kind of coach yourself through that is really important. And then I think just the ability to self-lead. I think there's a lot of people that look around for answers. And a big part of the work that I do with people is getting them to look inside for the answers, right? That's huge, because there's nobody else out there exactly like you. Nobody else understands the vision that you have for what you're building. Nobody else has the exact same skill set, the exact same lived experience. And I think the more you can cultivate that sense of intuitively trusting your path, that's a huge, huge asset to an entrepreneur. So that's something that I think there's a level of that can't be learned. I think there's a level of people that just, you either have that kind of deep sense of self-trust, but it's definitely something that can be cultivated over time with the right kind of tools and self-awareness. Another part of my background is I'm a meditation teacher. Meditation completely changed my life, saved my life, made my life 1,000 times more fulfilling and richer, gave me some sense of inner peace, because I didn't have a sense of inner peace my entire life until I was like 20, in my early to mid 20s. And it's just such that skill, bringing a lot of that self-awareness into my practice as I'm helping people learn, how to navigate their own path. Self-awareness is huge.
Once again, listen to I'm Refocused Radio, talking to our guest, Kelly Moser. And one thing that stuck out, I want to jump back on, is when you mentioned self-leadership, like I heard also like self responsibility, self accountability. Like it's like checking your progress, but also like, what am I doing? At the end of the day, what am I actually doing? Because you can listen to great minds like Gary Vee, Grant Cardone, like all these different people who are actually, successful in doing things that you can strive for. But you as an individual, it does you no good if you listen to people like that, but you're not actually keeping yourself accountable with your checkpoints.
Absolutely. I don't think anyone really has the perfect blueprint of what you're doing except you. I think that's like a divinely whispered assignment. And if we're looking around too much, we end up it's just human nature. We just copy what other people are doing. And it ends up really hurting us a lot of the time if we lose that sense of, that navigation system coming from within.
And that's good stuff, man. And when it comes to developing that mindset, when you're working with a client, an individual, what has been the pattern, if there is or has ever been one, where you see where they struggle the most when trying to stay consistent with the new ideas, the new habits that they're trying to form?
I think it becomes really obvious because that person complains about those things. It's the things that feel the least comfortable. It's the things that feel like they're not working. I'm just going to think of an example. So I was chatting with a client, coaching a client a couple of weeks ago, and she's developing a new service for the world that she really wants to bring out into her market. And she had in her mind that this was for a very specific kind of person, a very specific population. And it's not the population that she has built an incredible network in. She's got basically a decade of experience and connections in the health and fitness space. She's huge in the health and fitness space. But this, for some reason, she had this thing in her head that she wanted to bring forward and offer it to a totally different population of people. And it felt very hard for her. It felt like this was a big labor. And I asked her, why don't you just bring this service and apply this to the market where you already are so established and so influential? And she went totally silent. She took like 5 long seconds of just thinking. And then she looked at me and she said, because that feels too easy. And I think that's something that a lot of us grapple with. We struggle with walking through the open doors. We would much rather like knock and knock and knock and bash our head against the wall, bash our head against the doors that are closed and shut really tightly. There's something within a lot of us that makes us think that if we've had to really fight for something, if we've had to really work hard for something, if we had to suffer, then it makes the outcome somehow more valuable. It makes it more worth it. It makes it sweeter. It makes us feel like more of a success. And that's a story that we're all just making up. It's okay. It's safe to walk through the open door. So back to your question, when I find that there's a pattern that I see all the time is people feeling too insecure and too unsure about following that inner sense of self-leadership that's saying, hey, go this way, because this is how you can really leverage. This is the path that'll let you leverage your natural gifts and your learned skills the best. And instead we're saying, no, I'm going to go this other way because this is what other people are doing. And the manifestation of that is so obvious because people come to me and they're frustrated, they're burnt out, they're tired, they no longer feel connected to themselves, they don't feel connected to their mission anymore. And it's because they're not walking through the open doors. They're making things too hard. They're looking for reasons to struggle. And I know for a lot of us who've been through, significant hardship in life, or where we had to overcome challenges to survive, that's just the programming that we run on. In order to survive, I have to suffer. I have to work 10 times harder than everyone else. And that's very real for a lot of us in many situations. But when it comes to something like your business that you started and you get to choose how it looks and what you spend your time on, that doesn't have to be the story. So there's a lot of deconditioning, deprogramming, and reprogramming that has to happen there that says, you know what? It can be easier. Walk through the open door. I guarantee there's an open door right now. There's some low-hanging fruit that you're just ignoring because it feels too easy.
And when a individual is developing that strategy and that mindset to not just stay resilient, but also kind of what you're saying just before, you're not purposely making things harder than what they really need to be. Because when you're building a brand, you mentioned values. Like, sounds like that's a really core for your approach when you're dealing with clients. You're trying to search for that value, that main thing that they can tap into, and it doesn't even feel like work, because when you have that core identity, who you are, is natural. It flows. It doesn't have to be. Michael Jordan doesn't have to be inspired to play basketball. Like he just, it flows. It's naturally there. When you're helping that person develop that mindset, why do we? Well, better thing to ask is, what's some of the reasons that could be possible why we always compare our business, our brand, to our competitors, and we worry about them and what they are doing, versus just tapping into the core of who we are with our business, our brand?
That's such a good question. It's fear. It's fear that we are the only ones who don't have it figured out, and everyone else has it figured out and we don't. And just from a psychological, neurological perspective, our brains are hardwired to keep us on the path, keep us abiding by the status quo, because there's proof that that's safe. We like evidence. Our brain likes evidence. So if we're looking around at the results that other people are creating, and there's a result there that we are interested in creating for ourselves, our brain's going to say, okay, the natural pathway to that result is this path that this person is taking. When in reality, there are infinite ways to get there. There are infinite ways to create that result. And if that pathway doesn't leverage your unique skills, your values, your natural gifts, your lived experience, that way is not going to be easier for you. It's going to be harder. It's going to be harder for you than it was for that person who probably created that success, because that pathway did let them leverage their natural gifts and their skills. So I think it's a very natural thing that our brains do. We want to follow the safest path. Our brain's job is to keep us alive. And by, looking around at what other people are doing, there's evidence there that this is a survivable path. It might not be the easiest path for me, but it's a path where I probably won't die. And that's literally the way our brain functions. So I think it's very natural. And it just comes from fear. I don't know anything other than the path that I see that's spelled out, laid out before me, is an unknown. And the unknown is really scary. But what I really try to encourage people to do is embrace the unknown and say, yeah, maybe there's not a blueprint here. Maybe there's not a ton of precedent for doing it this way. And maybe everyone else who's, my competitors, the other people in my niche, are doing it this other way. That doesn't necessarily mean that my way is wrong. It just means that my skills might be more conducive to me taking this path, where all those other people might be living totally in alignment with their skills and values on the path that they chose. But it's okay if that's not for me. It's okay if I try something different. Experimentation is probably the next huge value that I try to impart with my clients, is that if you treat your business like an experiment, a science experiment, instead of a soap opera, you're going to see better results, because the time it takes between when you get the crap kicked out of you and the next time you stand up and try again is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. When you treat your business like a soap opera, you're down and out for sometimes days or weeks or months at a time when something goes wrong, because you make it about you. And a scientist doesn't walk into an experiment with any attachment to the outcome. They just walk in saying, this is valuable for me to experience, whether it turns out to be a success or not. And I think there's so much value in even the experiences that don't work out.
Yeah, I have a funny joke with that, because it's like, if someone were to eat, name a fast food, this picture is your favorite food to go to. The chef or the person cooking, right? They're not tasting your food for you and say, oh man, that was amazing. It's usually the other side. They will let you know the feedback. And what I'm trying to get to at that point is, is it possible that we are trying to experience our brand more so than the people we're trying to market to?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think what you're saying makes so much sense. And one of the things about the way our brains work is that we love little dopamine kicks that make us feel worthy and valuable. And I think a lot of times people end up building a brand, building a business that doesn't actually serve its original purpose, but has become this like addictive dopamine kick that we just, it becomes very self-serving rather than serving the people that we actually set out to help in the first place.
Man, I just learned some stuff right there. Man, once again, listen, I'm Focus Radio, talking to our guest, Kelly Moser. You also have a podcast, and I think I named your podcast wrong. Your podcast is top 2% in the global world space. But when it comes to the name of your podcast, tell us about your show.
Yeah.
The name.
The name is The Aligned Success Show with Kelly Moser. And I named it that because I wanted it to attract people who weren't just looking for the quickest buck. I wanted to attract people who really were values driven, right? Aligned success, not just the textbook definition of success, but the definition of success that you created, that means something to you, that isn't arbitrary, that's actually deeply meaningful and connected to who you are and how you want to show up in the world.
So I have to ask this last question before I let you go. Someone listening right now, they can look at your website. Your website is easy. It's kellymoser.com. They look at your social media. They see you doing all these quote unquote big things. But what was one or a couple of things that you personally had to overcome before you start seeing yourself and your brand grow?
So many things. I think crippling self-doubt, wondering, am I on the right path? Wondering, does anybody care about this? Is anyone going to respond to this? Am I good enough? All those things. And it's interesting that all of those things are now what I coach on because I get it. I wasn't born, I have a certain level of, I'm a Leo, so I have a certain level of confidence about me that has always been there. But when it comes to this new arena of being an entrepreneur, that confidence gets squashed really fast. And I was living for a long time, first couple of years of my business, as if my business was a soap opera. And every little failure, as small as someone unsubscribing from my email list would send me into this like emotional spiral of self-doubt. And I had to really kind of dig my way out of that and embrace. So I've been my own best client. I embraced that spirit of experimentation and resilience first. And that's really when I got over the emotionality. When I let things not be so emotional, that's when I started to be able to bounce back faster, be more nimble, be more creative, be more strategic, and be more resilient. And that's honestly when things started to take off much more, when I let it not mean anything about me and my personal value when something didn't work out.
So before we sign off, one more last question, I promise. When a person who decides, okay, I want to start my brand, or okay, I want to revamp my brand. I want it to be more exciting because it got dull. I need to grow, self-leadership, all that stuff, and push forward and all that great stuff. So it's part of this successful path is us just committing to our choices and taking action on our goals, because no matter what happens, we still make a choice. We either quit or we keep going. What's your opinion on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I really think the only way that you can fail is if you quit without really feeling ready to quit. Sometimes it's okay to walk away from things. I think that we should normalize walking away from something that really turned out to be it was just meant to be a temporary thing that I got to experience. But the only true way you can fail is if you walk away before your heart really wants to. And anything else, there's no such thing as a dead end. As long as your head is still in the game and your heart's still in the game, you're still in the game. There's no such thing as a dead end as long as you decide that that's not your last day.
Man, once again, kellymoser.com is the place you can go. Check out her podcast. She's on social media, but podcast, again, is the Alliance Success Show. You can catch her, man, everywhere. I mean, you're doing big things. Honor to have you on Refocus Radio. I'm pretty sure you're going to be doing some amazing things in the future. What else, if we haven't covered anything that you want our audience to know, if there's any additional resources or any call to action you want them to follow up on?
Thank you so much for having me. Just my call to action is just would love to meet you, would love to just connect with you guys. So if anything is resonating for you, reach out to me on Instagram. I love to send a voice note back. So let me know what you took away from this episode, and just really look forward to, building our networks together and supporting you in any way I can.